All right, so now that you're done with the introduction module, you're going to dive right into the learning units. I wanted to go over them real quick with you, kind of give you an example and of what you're going to be learning, and talk to you about how these different learning units are linked. I don't want you to think about these learning units as separate topics that have nothing to do with one another, because they're absolutely not only related but reliant on one another. And so these learning units are definitely important to understand that these overlap in history. They're not separate time periods. The first one is you're going to look at is Learning Unit 1 is talking about Reconstruction. And this is an era that followed the Civil War with the idea of fixing the nation after the Civil War. The Civil War had lots of damage, not only physical damage with roads and bridges and train tracks, but also emotional damage with the anger. You have to be angry enough at your neighbor to shoot them during a war, and now we're back to being brothers. And so there's some emotional damage that the Civil War was left with that needs to be fixed. And there's also economic damage. The Civil War left the South with no economy. They had a slave-based economy, and so now that has to be fixed. And so that's what this period's about. How do you fix that? And so when you're looking at it, think about it. Think about, is that the plan you would have suggested? Would you have tried something different? If Lincoln had lived, how different would it be? Think about these things as you're going through that learning unit. Learning Unit 2 talks about the West. And you're probably familiar with the West from the Hollywood movies, but that's not the West you're going to look at. You're going to study the West as it really was. The West, and this is not just the Wild West, the mining West in California, the Southwest with the cattle industry, but there's also a family West in the Midwest where it's based on farming. All three of these went through a major change in the late 1800s, in that in each area, large businesses took over the small businesses. So, for example, instead of a single man standing in a Cold River gold mining, it's taken over by a mining company that has large equipment, hires laborers to come and do the work. And it's equipment that most people can't afford. And so it kind of pushes out the small farmer. And in the family West, where they're farming, the same thing. Mechanized equipment meant that you could farm many more acres if you could afford the equipment. And so the small farmer was kind of pushed out in the same way. And then there was a new invention that seems very trivial to us that did the same thing to the cattle industry. You think of what it is? You're right. It's barbed wire. Barbed wire changed the cattle industry and, in fact, the shape of the Southwest forever. And so something as simple as a piece of wire changed history. And so all of that's going on at the same time on the East Coast. They're going through industrialization. And, of course, it's the same idea. Small cottage industries are being taken over by large factory run. So instead of a blacksmith, for example, making nails or horseshoes, these items are going to be starting to be made in factories. Instead of going to a tailor to have your outfit made, you're going to go to a department store and buy a pre-made one that was made in a factory. And so industrialization is going to change the way people buy things. It's going to require a lot of laborers, unskilled laborers. So a single tailor is going to be replaced with a dozen unskilled factory workers. And so it's going to change the dynamics in the city. Instead of it having a balance between middle class and lower class, it's going to be inundated with a laboring class. And that changes how the cities look as well, which, of course, is what you're going to look at in Learning Unit 4, urbanization. And, of course, urbanization changed drastically in this time period because of industrialization. And so you're going to get to see how the cities tried to cope with the influx of people, not only immigrants from around the world, but people in the Midwest that either couldn't make it as farmers or were pushed out, or just got sick of it because it was a hard living. And so they might have moved back to the cities, and you'll see how the cities tried to cope with all of these extra people. And then the last learning unit that I think are overlapping is Learning Unit 5, covers what's called the Gilded Age. And the Gilded Age really covers the business structure during this late 1800s, the same time period. And in the Gilded Age, it's known for corruption, and it's known for business practices that allowed monopolies. People like Rockefeller and Carnegie and Ford, these names will become familiar to you after you go through this learning unit. And you'll see how they took advantage of or utilized the influx of laborers in their business, and that without the laborers coming in, it wouldn't have happened. And that the factories and the industrialization and urbanization all is reliant on one another for this to have happened. And then the last learning unit you're going to look at is a result of those previous learning units. And Learning Unit 6 covers the Progressive Era. And you'll learn about a group of people, both civil and outside the government, that are trying to fix the problems that these previous topics we've talked about have caused. Urbanization caused filth. The corrupt, not only corrupt city governments, but corrupt business owners caused there to be a huge gap between the rich and the poor. And so this Progressive Era is talking about those problems. How do we fix those problems? And you'll see in this how this era is full of people, not just the lower classes complaining about their lot in life, but the middle class feeling like it's their duty to help fix those that are on a lower plane than them. And then this era also talks about, or this learning unit will talk about the United States moving into imperialism, and that's what the Spanish-American War. And you may not have studied that very much. And so this also takes the United States out of being just worried about just us, and it expands our interest into the world. And so you're going to read about some of our interests in the world and how we're trying to keep trade open, because now that we're making all those products, well, you want to sell them, of course. And so that's what you'll learn about in Learning Unit 6. All right, so I hope having this brief introduction will help you to understand and to know what you're looking for in these chapters. With that brief introduction, you may remember to look at the links between these various learning units as you go through. So I look forward to hearing from you as you go through these learning units. I look forward to reading your assignments. And again, stop by and see me if you can. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.